Hey there, name's Alex, and I'm no economist. But this would also not be the first time on this channel where I'm also not a central banker. Even if I was, right now, I don't know what kind of magic tricks I could even pull to stop the Russian ruble from continuing to drop in value relative to the US dollar. And I have to say that I really don't envy Elvira Nabiulina in her position as governor of the Russian central bank right now, who has to handle the issue of the devaluing ruble. When I was making my previous video on the Russian ruble, it had just hit a low of 100 rubles for one US dollar. And since then, it's been probably 10 days since I recorded the last video on the topic. The Russian ruble has just continued to tumble downwards relative to the US dollar. Let's uh, let's check out the graph and the chart of the movement of the ruble right now. As you can see, the last time when I did a video of the course of the ruble, it was just a little bit above, or it hadn't reached 100 for one US dollar. But since then, what it did on last Friday, it's on last Friday it jumped to almost 103, and since then it's only kept on jumping 104, and today it even peaked at 106. And that can't be good for a currency. You don't want your national currency fluctuating like that relative to the US dollar, which is the global standard in terms of currency and the global reserve currency, and the currency that most foreign exchange reserves are held in, and most international trade is done in. That's the benchmark. Your currency just gets compared to the US dollar. I've previously even written articles comparing the Russian ruble to some crypto meme coin or shit coin in the way that it fluctuates and constantly moves about up and down, or mostly down or relative to the US dollar, but still. And in the previous days, the Russian ruble just keeps on dropping like a rock in water compared to the US dollar. Now, if you're some root troll and someone who's completely economically illiterate and doesn't know how currencies work, you would be you would probably be one of those what up autists saying, "But what about but what about the Japanese yen or the South Korean won for that matter?" Since those are two currencies that nominally have a low value relative to the US dollar. But let's check how they've been doing. Let's look at uh, let's look at the Japanese yen, for example. We were previously looking at I think the ruble in the past week. And for the past week, the ruble lost 5.85% of its value relative to the dollar, whereas the Japanese yen for that time has even increased in value by, since I'm looking at US dollar to Japanese yen. If you flip this around, this means that the Japanese yen has actually gained 0.2% in value relative to the dollar since the same time last week. And let's show, for example, again, the the South Korean won. If I can view the chart, maybe this needs to refresh. Yeah, for the past week, the South Korean won has only lost 0.3% of its value relative to the dollar, whereas the ruble for the past week has lost 5.85% of its value relative to the dollar. Let's zoom out a little bit. Let's look at per month. So the Russian ruble appears to have lost 9.77% of its value relative to the dollar since this time last month. Let's check then the Japanese yen. It has only lost 0.9% of its value relative to the US dollar in the past month. Let's check then the South Korean won. It has only lost 0.59% of its value relative to the US dollar since this time last month. Yeah, maybe I can share the screen actually where I show it. Yeah, now you should be able to see that the South Korean won has only lost 0.59% of its value relative to the US dollar over the past month. Now, let's go back to the ruble and maybe zoom in for a year. Over the last year, the Russian ruble has lost 19.22% of its value relative to the US dollar. Let's compare that to the Japanese yen. And the Japanese yen has only lost 2.82% of its value relative to the US dollar over the past year. Let's do the same comparison for the South Korean won. 7.15% lost value relative to the US dollar over the past year. Still much better than the performance of the Russian ruble over the past year relative to the dollar. And maybe we should even zoom back 2 years ago. Let's see. Over the past 2 years, the Russian ruble has lost 76.56% of its value relative to the US dollar. In comparison to the Japanese yen, which has lost 10.27% of its value relative to the US dollar, and the South Korean won has lost 4.58% of its value relative to the US dollar over the past 2 years. That's why, and there is a reason why the US dollar is the world reserve currency and the currency that most international trade is settled in. And it's not the ruble for reasons that you maybe can see. But then someone could point out maybe that since Russia is an export-based economy, and a weaker currency actually benefits your economy if it's an export-based economy. And you would be right if we were talking about China, because China produces and exports nearly everything, and they do purposely, intentionally devalue their currency and keep its value low. But Russia is not China. Russia exports mostly raw materials and things that can mine from the earth or wood or such material with low added value and natural resources mostly. Russia barely sells and exports any produced goods with any added value. And they do import a lot, and a weak currency harms your imports because your imports become more expensive then. And if that was so, let's zoom back even 5 years because I want to show you. I want to show the moment right after the war started. This is back in March, 10th of March, when the Russian ruble hit a high of 135 rubles for $1. If it's so beneficial to have a weak currency for exports, then why did the Russian government and the Russian central bank scramble in a panic to do anything they can to stabilize and strengthen the ruble relative to the US dollar following the initial days of the start of the war, reaching as low as or as strengthening the ruble as much as 54 rubles for $1? Why did they have to do this? In order to achieve this, they had to take a set of economic measures like multiple increases of the central key interest rate of the central bank, which currently stands at 21%, which means try and take out a loan in Russia, see how much that'll cost you. You can't. And instituting measures such as no one can keep foreign currency in their bank accounts more than X. Businesses are supposed to keep at least 80% of their available cash in the form of rubles and not in foreign currency. And the government has been selling other currency reserves and gold reserves in order to buy up rubles to create an artificial demand for the ruble in order to keep the course of the ruble relative to the US dollar high. But all of that abracadabra, all of those magic tricks have now been exhausted. They've reached their limit, and now they're showing diminishing returns, and apparently those measures have have provided the result they could, and not anymore. Now I expect that we'll keep seeing the Russian ruble just devalue relative to the dollar. Maybe we can switch this around to see how many cents for for 1 ruble. So the ruble, 1 ruble now costs less than 1 cent, and the Russian ruble will, in my prediction, keep doing this. It will just keep going down and down because the Russian economy is pretty sick right now. Anyway, that's all I had for this video on the topic of the Russian ruble and its devaluation. Maybe one last thing. When you look at the devaluing of the ruble, when you see that it has lost 5.93% of its value relative to the US dollar, treat this as inflation. If you have 1 million rubles in Russia, that's $10,000, or at least it was $10,000 last week. Now it's $9,500. That's you've lost $500 by keeping your cash in rubles instead of dollars over that time. Take that into account. Consider that the rubles that you had a week ago now buy 6% almost less stuff. And since the Russian ruble is no longer sought after in the global currency exchange market, no one really wants rubles. One other YouTube channel that I follow, Joe Blogs, calls the Russian ruble a dead currency in the international markets. And not only that, the Russian ruble is less sought after. It's less worth less on the global markets. It also buys less in the internal Russian market. And this, to me, smells of hyperinflation, and I think the Russian people are going to feel the pinch soon. And that was it for this video. I've been Alex. I've not been an economist nor central banker. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. Drop me a comment below telling me how now is the right time to put all of your money in rubles, and it's going to moon in the near future, and the dollar is out and kaput, and it will be replaced by the BRICS currency, or whatever other nonsense you like to put in my comments. Share this video around, show it to people who don't really understand currencies and their movements, and also subscribe to the channel for more videos. And if you like what you see here and you want to support the channel, there will be links to support it in the description. That's it for me. See you in the next video. Bye.